I think that when we get up on that mic, or we get into the shoes of another person, or we do whatever we do when we choose a job like ours in a place where we're trying to be, where we are being seen, it's because we never were. And it is the simplest, most childlike desire, and it is the simplest human thing we could ever need, is to be witnessed.
You're listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a T. Torrance Productions original podcast.
Hey everybody, it's Kurt Newman. This is the Staring at the World podcast. Today I get to talk to a beautiful young actress that you all know. I didn't really know, but I got to know by doing research and talking to her, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Kurt Newman, and we are staring at the world today with a beautiful, young, famous Hollywood actress. I have to confess, when my daughter called me and said, you're doing a podcast with AnnaLynne McCord, I was like, who's that? I think I might have been one of the few people in the world who didn't know who you were, because you did a lot of shows that at my age and stuff.
Recording in progress.
I didn't really watch, but so I had to research kind of who you were. And I had to read about some articles and watch some stuff. And when I did, it was funny because the similarities between what you went through and what I went through in my life, I found kind of crazy. That we both came from kind of impoverished childhoods, and we both got into the entertainment industry and both took a sharp left turn into metaphysics almost to try to figure out what was really going on. But to draw that out a little bit, because I'm assuming most people know who you are. I'm probably the only person who didn't know, 9021 Nip Tuck.
I'm definitely your daughter's demographic.
Yeah, many TV shows, movies, everything, and everybody knows who you are. But for where I'm going with this, to draw it out for people a little bit, can we start at your childhood? Because it says you were born in 1987, and for me, I was already on tour with a rock band in 1987. So draw it out for me a little bit about where you came from with your childhood and what it was like growing up in Buford, Georgia at the time when you were little.
Well, yeah, Buford was one of the many cities. By the time I was age 15, which was when I left home, our family had moved 20 times. So not a lot of security, stability, time spent on food stamps. A good portion of my childhood was in, albeit lovely, trailer parks. And I was the kid with a pipe dream to be an actress, and that was never going to happen. And I had two little tiny middle fingers that I like to throw up if I knew what the middle fingers meant, I would definitely have been throwing them up earlier in my life. But my attitude was I was a rebel with a cause, and I was going to make that cause happen. But I think it's interesting, my journey, because there's the life that I thought I knew, and then there's the life that is my actual story. And that I wouldn't come to discover until I was 31 years old. So I lived a good portion of my life telling the story that I was a 9-year-old kid who decided she wanted to be an actress, who left home at 15 after she graduated from homeschool and studied in New York and tried it out in LA. And that was when I was 18, and 16 years later, here I still am. So that was the kind of that's the old version of the story. The parts that I didn't know, which I know now, is that I also was, during those periods of that very difficult childhood, I was also undergoing serious sexual trauma for years.
And what your mom and dad do for a living at the time, when you were really, young growing up?
My mom wasn't allowed to work. My father kind of kiboshed that. She went to cosmetology school. She cut hair, and that was her thing until they got married. And then after they divorced, she bought a barbershop and went back to that for a while. My father was kind of just a career hopper and there was always something wrong with somebody. It was never him. Um, but he went through many different careers. The one that he always wanted, and the one that he did for several years in different ways in my childhood, was he was a pastor.
And, you know, I read that you early on coming, like you were very ambitious, stuff you wanted to do, and we'll get to some of the other stuff where you talk about, the dreams you had being so important to you. But I noticed one of the other things you did early on was got into modeling, was it the Wilhelmina model agency? Something like
That's
that.
correct. Yes. Wilhelmina helped give me a start when I was very young. I was 15 and couldn't, make ends meet. I worked in Miami for a few years to save up money to be an actress, to be in acting school in New York, and they allowed me to work in the office, under the table. Don't tell anyone. But they gave me, and technically you have to be 16 years old to work in a work permit. So I was very shady, working under the table, making a living answering phones at first. And then I'm kind of one of those people who's like, I'm a hustler. Like, you want me to answer phones? I'm sweeping the floors. I'm
Yeah,
cleaning the bathroom. I'm getting you coffee. I'll pick up your lunch. You don't need to pay a delivery service. Like,
yeah.
I was willing to do it all. I had quite a work ethic, and I went from answering phones in the children's division to signing talent to moved back into accounts payable and doing billing and collections
But you
for
you were doing
a
modeling as
massive
well, right?
international company.
Were you modeling
I
as well?
was, yes. I was modeling as well, and that's what was great about the agency, was that it allowed me to, because when you're trying to break into modeling, you obviously don't work right off the bat. So I
Yeah.
had to be able to eat. That's why they let me work in the agency, and then I could leave to go on castings. And when I started working more consistently, you would think that would make them stop me from working in the office, but they just started scheduling all my work on the weekend. So I was like balancing this 40-hour work week with modeling gigs. It was the funniest thing.
And and then you kind of go off to drama school, right? New York, trying to get into drama, into acting as well, right?
I did. I studied at William Esper, and I was the youngest they'd ever accepted into the school, and that was tooth and nails me fighting with the teacher. And he's like, "We don't take anyone under the 20s into our prestigious classes." And I was like, "I love this. I want to be an actress, and I'll do whatever it takes." And I was like, I was not taking no for an answer, and I convinced him to just let me, I said, just a trial run, like, give me a month. If you think that I can't keep up with the class, then I'll leave, but like, give me a chance. And he did.
That's great. And eventually you move out. Well, I've heard you say you moved around a bit, but eventually you got your way out to LA to start working in, what turned out to be a big career out there as well, right? You were pretty young when you did that.
Yes. So when I turned 18, I subletted my New York apartment, and I went to, try pilot season, which is this which used to be for networks, the January to March season, where all the new network shows were casting. And like I said, 16 plus years later, I'm still out here doing the thing, and it was a really good decision to go west.
And here's why I bring all that up, because what struck me about it all is the age I'm at now, and what I've looked into, what I hear you talk about more these days, which is really about turning inward, and learning more about yourself and getting past abuse and all these huge things. But why I bring all that up, why I felt it was a lot like my life as well, is that in rock and roll, it always struck me strange that you pick this life where you go up to a microphone and you start yelling out to the world, about all this stuff in your life, right? Your perspectives, how you see things, all this anger, all this frustration, all this kind of stuff. And I couldn't help but feel when I was reading about a lot of this that coming from a place of abuse, I don't know for certain I was a child of abuse. My wife seems to think I was, but I know I had a pretty rough childhood. And I know, it was not, it seemed normal to me at the time, watching kids getting stabbed and smacked around and beaten and stuff like that was just normal to me at the time. But after years of getting
I'm
into
just
rock
gonna
and roll,
say your wife is right.
she
Just want to be
probably
on
is.
record for that one.
She probably is, but I have a theory about being broken and it being part of what I do too as an artist. So I will give you the fact that I'm very much still a broken person that way. But my point is, do we make these choices to yell out to the world and stuff like that because we're coming from that place of the world where we're trying to make sense of things and we're kind of screaming out to the world, whether it's playing roles in acting or screaming into a microphone? Are we maybe trying to reach the world that way and scream out and say, someone notice me or help me or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly, and something that we often do, and we're all guilty of it. We see with the eyes of the mind that we have now. So at your age, at my age, at anyone's age, at any given point, we're looking at our life, but from the standpoint of where we are now and all the life that we've lived and all we've experienced, and with the mind that we have developed over time as a result. Children don't have that mind. They don't have that brain. They don't have its development. They don't have the years of everything that's been seen and felt and experienced. And they don't have the capacity to create philosophies and outlooks and ideals on it. They're just living in life. And life is coming at them. And oftentimes it's coming at them very fast. It's very simple. That child wants to be seen. Am I here? Like, I don't know I'm here. I don't know I have a body. I don't know what a body is. I don't know what any of this is until someone reflects back to me something. And then what are children reflected back to? There's something wrong with you. You're getting it wrong. You're doing it bad. You're a bad boy. And when do we get to hear that we did good, that we got it right? Do we ever get to hear that? I remember one time crying at my father who was pointing out the crumbs on the floor. We had to sweep the floor 3 times a day, clean the counters 3 times a day, wipe the tables 3 times a day. And I remember crying like, could you for once tell me when I get all the crumbs off the floor? Could you ever point that out to me? And it was really just clearly out of desperation. And I think that's what it is. I think when we get up on that mic or we get into the shoes of another person or we do whatever we do when we choose a job like ours in a place where we're trying to be, where we are being seen, it's because we never were. And it is the simplest, most childlike desire. And it is the simplest human thing we could ever need, is to be witnessed and to be reflected back to. It's what we do. We have actual neurons for it. They're called mirror neurons. We actually reflect back to the world around us from within ourselves out and back in the same vein, vice versa. So 100%, I think that there's an expression for sure that we're putting out to the world about the world and all these things. But we project our own realities. So we're putting out there something that's coming from our lenses. And those lenses were painted and colored by the people who put their words into our heads when we did not have a mind to decide for ourselves. Right. And that's why it's labeled abuse. And that's why it's labeled these things that your beautiful wife is trying to validate for you, because the child part of you doesn't have your wisdom and your years of experience. That was a child. He was a boy. He was a beautiful boy, and he deserves to be honored and veneration provided to what he survived and what he experienced, because he wasn't you. He was a boy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part that I had to give to myself, because I had this unworthiness. for years and years. And it was until I became the woman I needed and started to mother that little girl in me, who I kept abusing myself, because I got into a lot of stuff that harmed the house that she lives in, because of what I believed and things about myself.
Hey everybody, it's Kurt Newman, Staring at the World. Thank you to our next sponsor, Be Bold Bars. Do you guys remember a few episodes back when Stacy Madison, co-founder of Stacy's Pita Chips, was on our show? Well, she's back again with Be Bold Energy Bars. They are refrigerated energy bars made with nuts, nut butters, chia, honey, maple, and cinnamon. They're delicious on purpose. All four of their bars are gluten-free, dairy-free, and plant-based. I've spent my life eating healthy foods like oats and nut butters because I really like it, but I think it's better than a lot of the garbage out there, so I want to put something healthy into my body. I think you guys should try these. They're really great tasting, a great way to put better food inside of yourself, and the fact that it's a woman-owned business, well, that just means they're making a difference by being bold. So here's the deal. I'm going to give you a chance to try them for 20% off. You use the code BOLD, that's hard to say, code BOLD, B-O-L-D, for 20% off all four flavors of BeBoldBars.com. That code BOLD for 20% off, BeBoldBars.com. You bring up something I've been saying. In fact, this podcast is called Staring at the World, which comes from a song I wrote called Idaho. And the song Idaho is about the perspective we have on the world. And that perspective is what we're told to believe. This is what I tell audiences all the time. We believe what we're told to believe growing up. And, obviously some of it is genetics and stuff that we got going on. But a lot of it is we see the world like our parents told us, or our friends, neighbors told us to believe what was going on around us, and we believed us. One thing about what you're saying there is, as a kid, you don't have the complicated tools to deal with a lot of this, but you do have creativity. And that's what this podcast is really focused on, is your playing roles, my making music. You could say it was just a coping mechanism, but it really was a safety valve for me. It was a place, literally, I would put on headphones and go somewhere with the music. And there were times I felt sad, how the music would fade out sometimes on a song. I would literally get sad because I wanted to go with the music wherever it was going. And that struck me as like, this is my place. This is my home. Like, music has kept me safe in my entire life. Never asked anything of me but what I gave to it, and stuff. So I'm wondering, what's your perspective on that? That people get into creativity because they're damaged cases, and it's kind of their therapy that helps them deal with it.
Well, yes, and I would challenge the notion that it's a coping mechanism. A coping mechanism is a suppression mechanism in order to survive.
Oh.
Creativity is an outlet.
Yeah.
That means that if we're kids, and you and I, whatever you went through, it sounds like we went through some similar things for sure. What you went through, what I went through, when we weren't us and we were that little girl and that little boy version of us was taking on poison. Poison was being infused into us. Every hit, every demeaning word, every disregarding, disapproving look, that was poison in our perfect little systems. Coping mechanisms push down the symptoms of poison. So we want to throw up the poison, and we're like choking it back and swallowing it. You do it following the music until wherever it goes into the ether, and me improvising and screaming Shakespeare all over the house was getting poison out of our bodies. What a gift.
Yeah.
What an absolute gift. I agree 100% with what you're saying. And I think that to your point, a lot of people put that notion forward that it's a coping mechanism, and it is not that, because a coping mechanism is actually the antithesis of that. Yeah. The creativity is the way to freedom. And it's why artists tend to do things that people are like, what are they doing at first? And then they make sense 50 years later, But it's because it pushes you to the very edge of life's existence. And when you stand and you face life and death in a moment, And I know because at 6 years old was the first time I almost died. I've faced death more than once. I've faced death many times and the potential of it. And when your body gets to the level of that kind of terror, that kind of heightened experience, that kind of intensity, there are a lot of things that I could fear in this world. Death is not one of them. And with my art, I am willing to go to the ends of my psyche to express what I believe is truth. And I do that playing villains. I do that playing characters that we hate in the world.
Right.
And my entire vendetta every time is you will love me. You will see something in me that you can't look away from, and you'll hate me for it, but you'll love me. And you'll hate that you love me, but you'll see my human side, and you'll know that I never should have been this person. Someone made me into this, and it wasn't fair, because no child grows up wanting to be a villain.
Yeah.
They become the villain because of what's the poison that's put into them. And I think that I appreciate you bringing that point to light, because I think it's a very important one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people need to think about that in their lives. I make an argument for just how important art is in our culture all the time. It's just been pushed so far back, as compared to, money and fame and stuff. Even in the music industry, it's like the money and the fame is more important than the art. And it's mind-blowing to me, because it's so important to our culture to have this to feel, to see a painting or hear music that makes you feel is so important for the world. And it's so healing. When I have shows now, I literally stop the show and say, did anybody notice how we can all gather in a room like this and sing songs together? And there's no division here. Everybody's united. There's no separation.
Fine. And it's the challenging factor in society. Art is here to challenge society's mores. Through time, it has been artists whose voices have caused us to be like, oh, I mean, I think about Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan is one of my favorite artists of all time. And he was constantly saying, get a clue, society, wake up. Wake up. You're gonna charge a black boy for a crime he didn't commit just because he was walking down the street at the same time. And he was saying this in the 60s, he was saying this at a period when this was not a conversation that white people were having. And he was telling story in his music, and he's a Shakespeare of our modern era, because of his lyrics, because everything was a question to a deeper part of yourself if you listen to his words. And I love one of his songs, Positively 4th Street, which is so amazing. But at one point he's like, I wish that for just one time you could step inside my shoes, then you'd know what a drag it is to see you.
It's true.
It's just beautiful. Like we can find humor with creativity and with art. We can look at ourselves but not feel judged because we're looking at someone else who's like us but not quite us. So we can kind of, there's a couple degrees of separation. It's so necessary. And I have a Juilliard trained classical pianist who's a friend of mine, and she's spoken out about music education for years, and she says, especially in underserved communities, when you teach a child music, you give them something that no one can ever take from them. When you're in these underserved communities and these kids are experiencing violence in their streets, violence in the homes, violence all around them, they just feel this lack of dignity, and everything is just so gross around them, and they start to feel that inside of themselves. They internalize that. But when you teach them an instrument, and she's had this experience of seeing the sense of pride and dignity that these children take on within themselves, because it's something that belongs to them now, and you can't take it away. You can't take what they learned away from them. They own that. And I just thought that was such a beautiful way to express what music, what art provides the human being, the human experience. It's the the closest thing to the divine that we have on earth.
It certainly saved me in school. I say this a lot too. People are probably sick of hearing it, but my brain didn't work the way like kids who are book smarts brain did in school. And I read you were homeschooled too, and which our kids were as well, just for that reason, because I grew up, in a system that I thought, this is so wrong, this is so backwards. But music, the chance to get out of a class and take a music class for me saved everything. It really gave me a place to go. Here's another thing I just heard you talking about in the other interview, though, that really drew a parallel for me and you in our lives. I spent a lot of years growing up rough, going out on tour as a young rock band. Around 31, 32 years old in the early 90s, I woke up a little hungover too many times and decided I really needed to change my life. And so I started, I got into a macrobiotic diet, and I started exercising more, got off drugs. And one of the things I did was I started reading more and more Eastern philosophies and stuff. And you brought up the Gary Zukov Seed of the Soul, which I discovered in a bookstore in the early 90s when nobody was talking about that book. And I read it, and I remember thinking to myself, every page I was thinking, I know this. I know this already. Like, why do I know this? And since then, I've seen so many people talk about the book and how touched they were by it. He really speaks to some common truths in there. And I was really surprised when you brought it up again in the other interview, because I've been telling people about that book forever. And tell us like what it meant to you, or how did it help you discover things in yourself that helped you find some kind of healing?
Oh my goodness. I mean, we how much time do we have on this podcast? Because I could talk about Gary Zukov all day long. Yeah, I found Seed of the Soul, and then I read every Gary Zukov book that he's written, because that's how I do things. I'm 0 to 100. If I'm in, I'm all the way in, and I keep going back. I keep going back to it. I listen to it on Audible because I love hearing his voice,
Yeah.
and I just re-listen to it, and I get something new every time.
Yeah.
But what I think is so profound and that people can take away from it, and especially if you're in the arts community, and I think that we are a little more open than perhaps the rest of the world, just because we experience something divine happens, right? When you're creating music, or when I'm
It's a
like
different
creating
part
my
of your
art,
brain, that's for sure. You're working with something else there. And you said,
something
I believe
else.
in magic over and over and over. And that's my belief system as well, is that
Yeah.
art is tapping into this magic energy out there somehow. And that's a real positive energy to tap into.
Absolutely. We're tapping into something that makes us all one, that connects us to all things across all spectrums of every dimension of reality, in my take on it. But Gary talks about five sensory humans, meaning the five senses. We can smell, we can taste, we can feel, we can see, all the things. And then he talks about multi-sensory human beings. I'm saying it very slowly on purpose. Multi-sensory human beings, meaning more than five senses are being used by these human beings. And the first time I read it, I don't think I knew what the hell he was saying, but I was just, it's like you said, it felt familiar. It felt right. There felt something hit my core.
Yeah.
Listening to it for like the 17th time, I'm like, yes, hallelujah. Because it's like I'm tapping into these different things, and now that I'm more conscious, now that I pulled layers of trauma off of myself from doing a lot of healing work, I am experiencing going into deep meditation, going into deep breath work, doing, a DMT ceremony. And like, for me, for years, I thought it was just, oh, I have a wild imagination. That's cool. No, like, I'm like, there's something out there that we don't fully understand. And I now have a sense of clear direction. That magic that I believe in is this, what I feel, and the words I put to it is communion with the divine. I feel a sense of oneness with all in existence when I tap into this space, and I feel that I can ask questions about direction in my life, about projects that I'm involved in, about people that I meet. And I have a strong sense that there's this overall presiding energy that we're all connected to, that is saying, I'm showing up for the part of the oneness that is AnnaLynne right now, that feels individualized by her name, her identity, her body. And so much of the language in Gary Zukav's book is giving you the freedom to feel, at a perception level that's beyond touch feeling, that is like the way we feel the wind. I can't grab it, I can't bottle it, but it blows my hair and it feels cool, and I know it's there. I feel something when I am deeply connected to my art, when I'm deeply connected to I've written poetry for years. It was an outlet for me forever. It was very dark and morbid for a long time, and something that is very sacred to me, in that it's how I express the different healing modalities that I've learned. And it's non-literal, and that's what, art allows you, affords you, right? It gives you the space to create something that evokes, or evokes a feeling. And sometimes I wrote a 14-minute poem. Like, reading it out loud takes 14 minutes it's like 7 pages long. And I don't think it came from me. Like, it came from somewhere,
Right.
but it didn't feel like it came from me. And it was at 4 a.m. in the morning. So that's why I really think it didn't come from me, because I had just woken up and it was like,
Yeah.
So yeah.
I felt that way my whole life too. I mean, music has always been what I felt coming through me as well. I never felt like it was just my divine perspective. I always felt like it's through you, even if you, as a songwriter, base it on your experiences, it's coming through you. But I never felt it was just mine. When I'm in a room singing a song with someone, I feel like it's ours. There's a certain energy, like I'm saying, there's a united energy in a crowd that's creating something really, really magical. And it only happens when we're doing it together and all of us are united in that kind of energy. So I see magic all the time, and I told my kids since they were tiny, that like magic exists, but it only exists if you look for it, if you believe it's there. If you don't believe in magic, then there is no magic. But if you do,
You'll never see it.
then it is there and it can be in your life. But yeah, you've got to look for it. You got to believe in it. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I wanted to touch on what you were just saying, the one world idea that you're talking about. I totally would love to see it. And I watched your kind of TED Talk too, and I literally felt like almost sorry for you standing there talking to the people, because it's a crowd of people who are really focused on innovation, but almost monetizing innovation, which is really the hot thing these days. There's a VC looking for the new idea, and everything's about, like I was saying, money and fame. And I worry that we're not able to get this message out, especially now with what's going on with the war in Ukraine and everything that's going on. It seems like the might makes right world is fighting really hard to hold on to that world. How do we ever get through to a world to say, believe in magic, believe in positive energy, believe in one world, believe in the power of love. Love is power supreme. All these things that sound so great, but I worry because I just don't see them happening out there these days.
Oh, absolutely. I understand all too well. But you did say something about something that I think is the pathway. You were talking about the magic that's created when you're all in a room and you're performing, and all of the spectators are singing and they're vibing with the music and the vibration of the sound and your voice and all the things, right? So you're in this oneness. I love Joe Dispenza, and he has a lot of data on heart-brain coherence. Also, the Heart Math Institute does this as well. But what Joe Dispenza's found is that 500 people in a room, 10 people in the side of the room, do a heart-led meditation where they are doing heart-brain coherence. At the same exact moment, all 500 drop into heart coherence. So 10 people affect the hearts of 500. Well,
Can
the
you,
heart space, why is that important? Because the electromagnetic field of the heart is the most powerful field we emit
yeah,
from our bodies,
I've heard
right?
that. I've heard that
Even more
before.
power than the brain.
Yeah.
We can send a field 9 feet outside our bodies. Like, it is a powerful energy field. When you do that together, you create a sonic boom of energy, and
Right.
it is felt, and it has ripples the world over. And what happens in a time of disturbance is that we get disturbed. And when we get disturbed, we don't like being disturbed. So we want to change it. Change follows being disturbed. So this disturbance that is happening in our world right now, it's happened before.
Oh, yeah.
It's happened many, many times in history. We learn from history that we don't learn from history. But at this point, never before in history have we ever had accessibility at the click of a button. And though the might moment is happening, what is happening in response? An incredible outpouring of love all over, everywhere is coming. And a country that should have squashed its opponent very quickly is failing to do so. And I'm sorry, but I'm going back to love on that one. And I think that the energy being sent to the Ukraine right now is so much love. There's so much love being poured out. And that vibration starts something. Everything, nothing comes from nowhere, something comes from somewhere. There was a void of nothingness, and
Yeah.
then we have all these planets, and we have Earth, and we have us. Like, where does it all begin? Albert Einstein said the greatest force in the entire universe is love. So we want to cancel this out. We got to get together on things, and disturbances pull us together.
Right.
That's what love does.
It does, but like you were bringing up some Eastern philosophies in the other interview as well, and if you read the Eastern philosophies, we know that the Buddha was saying these things like 3,500 years ago, and we're still struggling to really grasp it and digest it into our everyday lives. And why I keep writing songs, I think, is a lot of because of that. It's just like, why can't we just grasp this? Because there's always one or two people out there who are going to try and destroy it for us all. And how are we ever going to just battle that? How is love going to win out the day, you think?
Well, part of love in its truest form is an expression without condition. And that means that I love you enough to walk away without the expectation that my love will ever do anything to change you. That's a very hard love to process in our world. It's not the love we're taught. It's not the love we're shown. It's certainly not the love that my industry promotes.
Yeah.
But actual love says you have the right to cause harm to our world. You have the right to take your own life. You have the right to cause abuse. You have the right to do things that we don't want to talk about, things we want to say. The person, the individual, actually has the physical right to do it. There are repercussions to the choices that we make. But all pervasive love doesn't withdraw itself when the going gets tough. And it certainly doesn't have the expectation that it will see the end of what it is trying to provide a solution for. So if we love this world with our art, with the depths of our soul, with the divine communion that brings down that art into us, however that happens, with all of its magic, and we get to that last day that we all have on planet Earth, where we look back on our life as we're prepared to breathe our last and say goodnight to this world forever. And if at that point, if we've done our absolute best to love with as little conditions as possible, we got to be willing to walk away. We got to be willing to say goodnight to this world and know that we did all we could do. And that is exactly what we should have done. And that is enough.
Maybe
it is 4:44 p.m. right now, which means it's angel numbers right now. And I am so happy for that. Where I am, it's magical numbers.
All right. Well, I'll just end it by saying I have a new record coming out. And the first song on the record is called Loved. And it's about my children knowing that they were going to be loved when a lot of children like you and I may have not understood that right off from the beginning. So I'm doing my part to spread the word, and I wish we had more time because I have a million questions for you, but maybe we'll get to talk again sometime. Thanks so much for being here. AnnaLynne McCord, everybody.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being the dad that we needed.
I try. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman. Please be sure to download, subscribe, rate, and review, and keep listening wherever you get your podcasts.